Hello, my name is Nikita Kovalovs, and today I will be talking about my survey results and recommendations for my research about encouraging cooking in the dorms. The purpose of this presentation is to share the results of my survey, which looked at student cooking behavior in the third floor of Terry Hall. With this study, I wanted to answer the design question of how can we redesign the physical space of the third floor Terry Hall kitchen and address extrinsic and intrinsic motivators that may affect cooking behavior to encourage college students living in this dorm to cook their own meals. The overarching motivation for my study is that cooking meals creates diets that are low in sodium and unhealthy fats and therefore is associated with health benefits. By encouraging college students to cook for themselves, we can create good dietary habits that will last long term. This study references the following setting. The image on the left illustrates the Terry Hall third floor kitchen space, and the image on the right illustrates the Terry Hall third floor aerial layout. As shown in the layout, the kitchen can only be accessed from one entrance. Before I go into the details of this survey study, I briefly want to discuss previous research results. In a prior field study, where I observed students cooking in the third floor kitchen, I discovered that there were issues with the physical space. These issues included crowding by the corner in the stove, and an inconvenient transfer of supplies, as students had to carry their materials from their dorm to the kitchen and back. In the interview phase of my research, I discovered that there were external factors that affected cooking behavior. I found that there were extrinsic and intrinsic motivators for cooking in the dorms. Unfortunately, my field study and interviews neglected an important group of people who don't cook in the dorms at all. Seeing as the design question seeks to encourage students to cook in the dorms, it is important to gather information on the group of people that doesn't. In addition, this survey seeks to validate previous findings about the physical space of the kitchen and discover which motivators students prioritize. I distributed this survey to 15 participants using Google Forms. I included a variety of questions, including multiple choice, rating, ranking, and short response that aim to confirm, explore, elaborate, or extend previous findings. Some of the higher-level research questions that I used for this study were: what are the patterns of kitchen use, including frequency and purpose? And what intrinsic motivators have the most weight in making the decision to cook in the kitchen? One thing to note about this study is that the sample size is small, and thus it is unlikely that the results are significant. Another limitation of this study is that the results are particular only to the third floor kitchen and may not scale to other kitchens on the other floors. As far as my participants, for this study, I included students who cook regularly, cook occasionally, use the kitchen for heating up food, and who don't cook at all. I included all these categories of people because there are only a select few of people on the third floor of Terry who prepare meals entirely from scratch in the kitchen. I excluded people who do not live on the third floor of Terry Hall because I wanted to ensure that my participants are familiar with the kitchen referenced in the design question. After sending out my survey and analyzing the data that came back, I came up with the following results. Result number 1. Longer perceived walk time to the kitchen correlates with a decreased cooking frequency. This result was derived by looking at how far students reported to be from the kitchen entrance and how often they reported to cook in the kitchen. Looking at the first half of the bar graph reveals that there is a downward trend in how often students cook in the kitchen in relation to how far they are from the entrance. It is important to note that the latter half of the bar graph appears to contradict the trend seen in the first half of the bar graph. However, this inconsistency can be attributed to outliers. Overall, this graph illustrates that the longer the walk time to the kitchen entrance, the less often students cook in the kitchen. What this implies is that students that are closer to the kitchen entrance are more likely to cook in the kitchen. In other words, shortening the distance from the kitchen entrance to students' rooms might be a viable way of encouraging students to cook in the dorms. Based on this result, I recommend that a door is installed in the leftmost corner of the kitchen so that the distance from either ends of the hallways is equal to the kitchen entrances, as shown in the figure to the right. Result number 2. Conducting multiple trips to transfer supplies between the room and the kitchen is the most frustrating transportation method. This result was derived by looking at transportation methods reported by students, and also their frustration ratings with transferring materials. The following graph shows that the least frustrating way of transporting items is by stacking them and carrying them into the kitchen, and the most frustrating way is by taking multiple trips back and forth from and to the kitchen. Moreover, it appears that bags are a less frustrating transportation method than large plastic bins. Overall, this result implies that students prefer making just one trip with all their supplies over multiple. This further implies that non-communal design solutions must provide a lightweight way for transporting many supplies at once. Based on this finding, I recommend the distribution of reusable bags, the creation of storage space so that students can leave their supplies in the kitchen, and also the implementation of communal supplies that students can share amongst each other. Result 3. Students value cooking for its health benefits the most. This result was derived by looking at the average ranking that students gave intrinsic motivators based on how influential they are in making the decision to cook. As shown by the bar chart, students rated the health benefits of cooking the highest. This implies that students are most driven by personal health to cook. What this means is that spreading awareness of the health benefits of cooking could encourage more students to cook. Based on this result, I recommend implementing a weekly cooking and nutrition program in the dorms, where students can learn how to prepare meals. Having gone over the results, I present the following prioritization of my recommendations. At number 1, I said that students should be given reusable bags, they should be allowed to store supplies in the kitchen, and they should be given communal supplies that they can share with their peers. I placed this recommendation at number 1 because it echoed the results from my previous studies, in that students expressed a desire for a communal storage space. Furthermore, a communal storage space and communal supplies were the most heavily requested improvements in the short answer portion of the survey that asked how we can improve experiences of students cooking in the dorms. For the second recommendation, I decided to prioritize introducing cooking and nutrition programs and activities in the dorms. I put this recommendation after the first one because it would require a little bit more planning. Its payoff, however, might be even more rewarding than the first recommendation. This is due to the fact that all the respondents who said that they don't ever cook in the kitchens said that they don't cook because they don't know how. Implementing a program that both taught people how to cook and spread the awareness of the health benefits of cooking would be the most effective way of encouraging students to cook in the dorms. I placed installing a new door as my final recommendation because this recommendation will require the most resources and time. It will require the removal of a wall and existing kitchen cabinets and counter space, and therefore is not the fastest answer to the design question. As far as next steps go, I would need to do research into how students would prefer the communal storage system to function, given that there is not enough space in the kitchen to store everybody's supplies. To do this research, I would conduct another round of interviews and surveys to understand the kinds of things that students are concerned about when it comes to sharing a storage space with others. Additionally, I would need to do research to understand what kind of cooking and nutrition programs or activities students would be interested in. In order for these programs to succeed, we would need to know when students are available to meet, and who would be best to host these programs. I would also conduct this research using another round of interviews and surveys. If I were to conduct this survey again, one thing I would do differently is modify and distribute the survey to people on other floors and in other dorms to get a better understanding of student cooking in all the dorms instead of just one specific kitchen. To reiterate, one of the biggest limitations of this survey study is that it has a small sample size and population. Furthermore, given the format, there is also potential for response bias, which could negatively affect the reliability of my results. The most challenging part of this survey study was cleaning up the data and finding interesting trends across questions. This was tricky because it required me to create manual tables in Excel with custom labels in order to graph the data properly. One of the things that most surprised me about my survey was that I expected to see way more people who didn't cook. This was surprising to me because I underestimated the amount of people that use the kitchen on our floor. The most fun part about this survey was that I got to interact with people that I had never met before. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.